Hey, I'm Sasha Shetko, and I am the director of the Sensation and Motion Lab at San Diego State, and I'm an assistant professor here in the School of Exercise and Nutritional Sciences. So my research really focuses on the way that we use the sense of touch to inform the way that we move. And part of that is actually looking at reflexes that are mediated by the sense of touch, and that's a lot of what we study in the lab. So if you go to the doctor's office and they want to test the integrity of your spinal cord, what they'll do, right, is they'll do something like a reflex test where they hit your patellar tendon with a reflex hammer, right? They don't just ask you, is your spinal cord working? Because you just don't know. And by the same token, you don't necessarily know if your sense of touch is working in an important way. Which is the way that we actually use our sense of touch every day. So even though I can ask you to feel a cat and say, is it fuzzy or not? If I actually want you to, the way that you use your sense of touch in everyday life is like rummaging through your backpack and finding a pencil. And that's just a different type of sensation, it turns out. It actually goes through different pathways in the central nervous system. And that's what we're interested in testing in the lab here. So a lot of what we do are these very rapid corrections toward a target that are based on tactile, or the sense of touch, sensory feedback. So what we'll do is we'll apply very specific stimuli like a rotating platform or a very small feature, almost like a grain of sand that people will feel. And then we'll look at the way that they move in order to correct for that or in order to feel that specifically. So really how the body is using the process of moving to feel something. That's kind of the critical thing in what we're looking at. And then by comparing the way that people move when they're trying to feel something in different scenarios, maybe if they have a sensory pathology or if they don't, we can actually get more in-depth understanding of the sense of touch, and maybe down the road actually ways of diagnosing sensory pathologies related to touch. A lot of the time when we're thinking of movement, we think of like the motor system as being the big thing, but actually the sense of touch doesn't get enough respect, and the sensory systems in general don't get enough respect, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here by looking at the way that sensation informs motion.
2, 1, go.
So one of the kind of unusual things about research in our lab is that there isn't just a lot of off-the-shelf apparatus to actually measure any of the things we're interested in. So a lot of labs, you'll go into them and you'll be interested in like heart rate or blood pressure or something, and right, you can just use something in order to record that data directly. But for us, we always have the step before we actually start the experiment where it's just like, we know what is important to measure, but we don't actually have any idea how to measure it. So there's a big aspect of problem solving in just inventing everything for the study itself and then actually being able to run the study. So probably in terms of the breakdown of time for experiments is probably like half of the time is actually just developing the protocol, maybe a quarter of the time is running the participants, and then the other quarter of the time is analysis. So a lot of the work that goes into this is kind of on the research and development of the apparatus itself. So that's something that's really fun to me because I just like building things, but it's a little bit different from some of the other labs that you might interact with in ENS. As far as the kinds of measurements that we make, we do use electromyography, so we'll record from the muscles to see when people start to react to maybe feeling a particular stimulus. We also use motion capture, the same way you would in biomechanics, to look at when the actual limb starts to move, so we can both measure from the electromyography when the muscles start to pull on the bones, and then we can see, okay, so when do the bones actually start to move using that. And then we also do a lot of things looking at the forces that people apply with their hands and fingers generally because we're interested in the sense of touch. And for those we use force sensors, which are basically like a miniature force plate that can measure all of the different components of force that people are applying to things. Generally, we just do our research on healthy young adults at this point because it's really on the basic side of science. So eventually we might be able to apply some of these findings to look at how the ways that healthy young adults interact with an object or use the sense of touch differs from people with a sensory pathology, whether that's due to aging or carpal tunnel syndrome or any of a variety of other conditions. But right now we're mostly focused on healthy young adults and just sort of getting that normative data about how do people in general use the sense of touch to inform the way that they move. If you are interested in doing research in the lab, I'd be happy to chat with you. Again, because we have this breakdown where it's mostly developing and then occasionally collecting data, it's not always going to be the case that I'll have something to do, but especially in the case of actually collecting data, it's always really helpful to me to have students in the lab working on those protocols. So feel free to reach out, and that's all. I don't know.